Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to have you back. I'm still working on my anger presentation. It's turning into more of a research project than I intended it. Just there's too much. I might have to simplify it down and make it a more easy presentation. I'm basically looking at combining grief and anger. I could do a series, good point. What I am going to do today is on multiple addictions. So there's something we're going to talk about called addictions interaction disorder. Maybe give me a thumbs up if you've heard about it before. Okay, so we're going to talk about addiction interaction disorder and multiple addictions. Now, the reason I want to bring this up is everybody can have a version of this. It doesn't mean that you're completely addicted. You can have different levels. You can almost say it's a multiple dependency disorder or something like that. But basically, it is mostly around addiction. But what we're going to talk about it, maybe you can envision how you can relate to it personally, not just other people in your life that you can identify. Now, basically, at the core of this thing is that your brain as a resource is going to be taxed by multiple behaviors, sometimes substances, that will, like I said, tax it for its energy, and it will start to bring down your brain functionality. A lot of times these behaviors over and over again, especially when they're addictive, can reduce gray matter in the brain, which is important for the function of the brain. And so I want you to think about the very many ways that you would do something to make yourself feel a little bit better, okay? It could be work extra hard and get a pat on the back. It could be eat a bit of ice cream. It can be drinking some alcohol. It can be looking at porn. It can be going for a jog. There are healthy and unhealthy versions of this. But you know, there's a lot we don't even think about. And that's what today's presentation will bring up with you. So the thing is, we're back to a problem of admitting if we have a problem. And I don't want you guys to get all pathological on yourselves when I do this presentation. Just because I'm bringing this up and you might have some level of problem in this area, don't turn it into an entire addiction or some other, here I go again, I got more problems to have to deal with. I'm not doing it for that reason, okay? I'm doing it for the reason of getting you to consider all the multiple ways that you do try to medicate yourself, okay? That's really what we're looking at. Don't just be aware of how you medicate yourself. And I'm going to give you 4 major categories, okay? Now, just so you know, full disclosure here, I am speaking to you with some notes from Recovery Zone Volume 1 by Patrick Carnes, Making Changes That Last, the internal tasks. So these tasks are things about helping people who are running through, say, sexual addiction, how to work on their feelings, the internal matters. And it's a really good book. I recommend it. We use it in our second stage of recovery for people with sexual addiction. But it's good for partners to know about this as well. So there's 4 addiction types, as Carnes puts it, and I'm going to give it to you now. The very basic ones, substances. We all know about substances, right? We've got issues like tobacco. We've got issues like alcohol, cocaine, methamphetamine, nicotine, heroin, prescription drugs, caffeine, marijuana, and on and on and on, right? There's many different categories of substances. I just got, not just a few months ago, I got a certified multiple addictions therapist certification. And we learned a lot more about this than I ever thought I wanted to know. So substances is one area you got to consider, okay? Like we all know those ones. How many glasses of wine do you have per day, right? That kind of thing. Then there's process, and that's more where I'm mostly an expert in is processes. And so we have sex addiction, work addiction, exercise can be addiction, video games, food problems like anorexia, bulimia, binging, money issues, gambling, shopping, e-trading, so on, and internet or cyber sex. So those are process areas that people can be addicted to. Then there's an area he calls feelings or emotions, but they're not really emotions, feelings. And and then this is a very interesting category I want you to think about because you and I are wired a certain way. And when we feel something like anger or rage, we are flooded with chemicals that make us feel energy, that make us kind of have muscle tensions and willingness to act. So, in a sense, rage can be, or anger even, can be a drug, okay, chemically in the body. And then we can evoke it through a process like thinking about something that really upsets us. So, when you have something like a tired day and you could watch news, and that news is sure to make you angry, you're kind of participating in a drug of anger to get your levels up. Now, it can be watching news can be a process addiction to some people. But the doing it for the anger, that's the trick to figure out. Are you doing it to be angry? Okay. Fear could be another one. And, why do people watch scary movies? There's actually a chemical reaction when you're really afraid, and it can give people energy. So people can actually become almost addicted to fear. They can put themselves into very scary situations, high risk situations, in which they would be evoked into fear. Shame or self loathing, believe it or not, has a chemical response. Intensity, so getting something just in such an intense level can evoke its own chemicals. Love, for instance, feeling sexual attraction, that kind of stuff can bring chemical attention or reactions. And they go on. Okay, all the feelings that kind of give you a stimulus mostly. Okay, those ones. The last category, the fourth category, are compulsive attachments. Now, what I want you to think about attachments are when you're putting your worth, your value, that kind of stuff on the line to connect it with something you hope to control. That's the simplest version I can come up. You hope to control it. You're putting your sense of self and security on the line on that thing you think you can control. It can be something like seeking and staying with a troubled person. That troubled person brings all kinds of drama to your life, but you're attached to that person. Or pathologically giving and rescuing other people, becoming the hero. That has a drug in itself, to feel like I'm saving the day. Intensity, drama, or crises. So entering into very chaotic situations evokes you into having these feelings and makes you feel more secure, ironically, even when you're in an insecure place. um, as impression management, right? Showing off, trying to demonstrate yourself. And codependency is sort of the simplest one of these. Codependency is when I'm only okay if you're okay. So I will bow to your wishes or will please you or will do whatever I can to make you happy so that I can be happy, right? Co-addiction is sort of going along and doing the addiction stuff with the person. And trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is a whole other story, could be its own presentation. But trauma bonding is basically when you're attached to the one who wounds you. Part of the attachment is that they wound you, and you're stuck in that trauma cycle with that person. So those are the categories he comes up, four categories: substances, process, feelings, and compulsive attachments. So this is just a starter list, if you will, main categories that Carnes brings up for us to pay attention to of ways we can be addicted. Okay. And if not addicted on all, compulsed on some, addicted on others. Okay. So one of the things that I want you to look at is the ways that addictions can interact. So if you can already be honest with yourself, okay, and maybe that's a hard thing for some people at this stage, but if you're thinking about how you escape from pain, very simple terms, how do I escape from pain? Or boredom can be pain, right? Um, um, Insecurity of any kind can be pain. So whenever I'm feeling in not a good place and I want to get out of it, what do I do? And if some of those things are perfectly fine and healthy, but if I keep going to it as a dependency, okay, it can become something like an addiction. And then here's the other thing. These different forms of coping start to interact with each other. And then we get combinations of them. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Okay. I'm going to talk about the way that our different compulsions and addictions interact and why we have to pay attention to that. So one of them is called cross tolerance. Cross tolerance happens when two or more addictions will increase the person with the addiction's ability to engage in more addictive behavior. So your use alcohol, for instance, and sexual behavior at the same time. So the alcohol increases your ability to be more sexual. Cocaine can create arousal drive when a person, say, is looking at pornography and masturbating. So one drug is feeding the other drug. Does that make sense? So it's cross tolerance, and it builds, it escalates. Okay, it goes basically, it becomes something that just develops more and more over time as they kind of push each other further and further. The more masturbating, the more cocaine. The more cocaine, the more masturbating, and that kind of thing. The other one is called withdrawal mediation. Withdrawal mediation is basically when you're quitting one thing, okay, but you have to use another. Now, I've done this in the past when I used to smoke a long time ago, couldn't quit smoking until I said I would smoke a cigar once on weekend. And then I won't, every time I wanted to smoke a cigarette during the week, I said, no, I'll have a nice hour-long cigar on the weekend. And I kind of replaced one type of nicotine with another type of nicotine until basically I got out of the habit of smoking daily. And then I was able to give up the other aspect. But that's one version. Another version is um, people who are going to AA meetings, and you come, and how do you know where an AA meeting is? There's a big puff of cloud over the meetings place, the rooms. So, because why? Because people are outside smoking. So it's a common thing when you go in and you see there's they're supposed to be there to recover from addiction. And yes, thankfully, many of them are not drinking alcohol. But what are they doing? They're having lots of coffee and drinking lots of coffee, and they're smoking lots of cigarettes. So the cigarette smoking might be a mediation to help them withdraw, because the fact is they're not going to alcohol anymore. Okay, which is similar to replacement. That's when one completely replaces the other. Um, they usually, these situations, the addicts stopped for a time, and then they added some new element, or something. For example, a broker who works in high stress or trading stocks in the stock exchange, high stress job. He can then use marijuana to relax and get through the day. The marijuana then becomes part of the problem. He goes to treatment, he gets sober, he returns to work. After a year, the stress gets to him and he does not want to use marijuana. He discovers another thing, massage parlors. He goes to massage parlors to start to do those things instead. Soon, sexual behaviors assumes the former role as marijuana use used to use, and he becomes the coping mechanism with all the secrecy and lies that the marijuana use had. He still considers himself in recovery and fails to notice how he slipped into the same patterns by another means. So replacement, you're taking the same kind, a different kind of drug, you're going at it and you're doing the same patterns you did with the other kind of drug. And you think you're better because you're not doing the other kind of drug. If that makes sense. Alternating cycles. So this involves certain pattern or rhythm of how we use different things. So for instance, a woman who's out of control with her sex, but anorexic with her food. And usually there's a combination. This is a good example. When women are being sex or have sex addiction, there's often a combination with their body weight. So For some, they protect themselves by eating more and maybe gaining weight. It makes them feel less sexual, so they're less likely to act out. Then they start to exercise and they start to lose weight to feel better. And as they start to feel better and lose weight, they start to become more sexual again. So there's a cycle to the whole thing. Okay. Um, so I think that's something, alternating cycles is something a little harder to grasp. But when you start to see it over and over again, you recognize it is about pattern between how the cycles go. Okay. Food issues leading into sex issues. That could be an example. Masking. Um, Masking is where you basically blame one out of control behavior for the problems of another out of control behavior. So you can say, "It's I'm not responsible. I only went to the massage parlor because I got drunk at lunch." Like getting drunk at lunch should be a signal to you that there's a problem, but to blame the alcohol on the other behavior is a form of masking. Okay. And what you don't realize is that subconsciously, you're purposely seeking out the drink to make it an excuse for the other process behavior. Okay. Or consider when alcohol is this excuse for rage. I lost my temper, but it wasn't me, it was the alcohol. Um, that kind of thing. So, anyway, just an example, masking is excusing one addiction by blaming another addiction. Rituals. So this one's kind of interesting because addiction has a ritual in and of itself. Okay, we'll do that sometime where we'll talk about the whole addiction cycle. That'll be an interesting talk. But this can happen where rituals of one addiction are the same as another addiction. Then the joining occurs at a synaptic level. Um, so basically, um, driving in certain areas where there are casinos, drug dealers, sex-oriented businesses is not accidental. There's a ritual that you're participating in, a pattern, and that pattern leads you to the drugs. And it's like it's the same pattern to get to the prostitute, it's the same pattern to get to the drug dealer, it's the same pattern to get to the bar. There's a pattern that's basically the core of the addictions, if that makes sense. Um, Now, fusing is a different area. This is how the one addiction will amplify the impact of another. Okay, so cocaine addicts have a huge fusing problem. More like a lot of studies have been done on that, especially around sexual compulsivity and cocaine. Um, so, so what? To give you an example, I won't use cocaine. That's in the book. I'll use another example. Um, there's there are some sort of pharmacologically designed drugs that enhance sensual feelings. And if you take those drugs and then have sex, it's like sex on drugs. It's this enhancement of the sexual behavior, enhancement of the sensual feelings you have. And so people will participate with a certain kind of drug, not to use it as an excuse, not to numb or other things like that, which I think we'll get into, but basically to enhance the feeling of being on on that drug or doing that behavior. So so that's another one. Numbing is the opposite. Numbing is when you're trying to not feel. You're numbing it down. A lot of people with trauma do a lot of numbing. Well, they do a lot of everything, but it's very common to see numbing. Common pattern is to do high risk behaviors all evening, then drink, then masturbate, then overeat. And basically, what you're doing is you're upping to the point when you're so blown over with stimulation that you don't feel anything anymore. You know what a good analogy to that is cutting. You know, when people are doing self mutilation cutting, when they're cutting, it's a form of numbing. It's a form of feeling the pain to not feel anything. Okay, now if that doesn't make sense to you, I'm glad, but for people that are nodding their heads, it's because unfortunately they've experienced that. The ability to over over stimulate the senses to the point that you don't feel anymore. Okay? Then there's disinhibiting. Okay, that's classic. That's the person who needs liquid courage. Drink a little bit and gets you kind of set the way to go and do the behavior that you really want to do. Um, well, a quote here: "I would think of what I wanted to do sexually, but would have to get drunk to do it." Okay, that's disinhibiting. You're removing the brake pads so that you can glide right into the behavior. Okay. Another one which sounds similar to the other ones here earlier, but combining, that's when you need two different types of high to get the right high. Okay, so combining means like okay, so there's certain kind of um, drinking and that they can make you feel a certain warmth, and then you go and do a certain kind of drug like cocaine to get you energetic, and then you go into a park and have sex with a stranger, which is high risk. And the adrenaline of the high risk plus the cocaine plus the alcohol is a combined high that gives you that right kind of high, the high you're looking for. So that's what combining is. So it's not just like the other versions we were talking about. It's like the accumulation of two or three different highs at the same time gives you the right cocktail, the right mix. Okay. And then there's inclusive. Sometimes one addiction is always present and it serves as a background to the others. It's like your go to no matter what. Pot is like that for a lot of people, marijuana, alcohol for a lot of people. So, here to give an example, if you smoke when you eat, drink, work, or have sex in an addictive way, then this addiction is fundamental to the addictive neurocircuitry of your brain. It becomes the neurochemical touchstone that all the other behaviors touch upon. So some people have a dominant addiction. That's another way of saying inclusive. Everything else is connected to it. Okay, so these are some of the major things to be looking at when you're looking at coping behaviors. Now, when I mentioned those things earlier about even things like exercise and some healthy things like food's good, but it can be unhealthy how we eat, okay, or what we eat sometimes. So you want to look at how all these things interact in your life. And hopefully you're not on a level where you have three or four or more of these addiction interaction disorders that I mentioned, but you probably have a few. And even if on one level it's like, Michael, I'm not addicted to alcohol, but I do use alcohol once in a while a certain way. Um, and it's always around this other thing that I tend to not want to do, but I end up doing. So you can start seeing the combination patterns of how these things interact. Okay. So again, the workbook is called Recovery Zone, Volume 1 by Patrick Carnes. And the section that I spoke out of is Chapter 3, the Addiction Interaction Map. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is, as usual, we're going to open it up to any questions on the topic I presented. And then we'll move to any topics that are anything related to psychotherapy, really, that you might want to ask at this opportunity. Okay. Okay. So if you have a question, do the ellipses, the three dots, and then I'll know a question is coming. So what's the difference between fusing and cross tolerance? That's a good question. Okay. So um, cross tolerance is really about each drug is building you up to use more drugs, more of the issue, more intensity, more of like drug A and drug B. You have to do drug A to enjoy drug B. You do drug B, makes you do more drug A, and they accelerate each other. Okay, that's cross tolerance. Fusing is when they're sort of they're a pair that they don't necessarily escalate, but they're they're a pair that kind of works together in combination. That's the wrong word, because there's combining, but fusing works in where it stays as a pair. Um, it's the cocaine and sex kind of feeling that's different than cocaine amplifies the sex and sex comes back and makes you do more cocaine. That's the only little difference that I know. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that question. That's the hardest one to answer. By the way, Carnes came up with these, so I blame him if it doesn't make sense. All right. Replacement. It could be a healthy thing. I I presented it like it could be a healthy thing. Other therapists would not. I don't think it's a healthy thing long term, because you are saying something that, like I use the example of a cigar. I think that was the one I used it on, versus cigarettes, that kind of thing. Um, but I really don't think you should do that approach, if you can help it. I think, um, if you can find replacement of a healthy thing like good exercise that isn't pathological, that isn't too much, that would be good. That would be great. Okay. Um, so don't take my thing the wrong way. Yes, exactly. Using jogging instead of something else bad. Exactly. Yeah. But Carnes wouldn't say that's replacement in the addiction interaction disorder. He would just say that's forming a new positive habit, and it's not called replacement in the sense of what he used these terms for. Okay. Okay, next one is, so if one stopped drinking and then the tolerance for sexual exploration also went away, is that like the opposite of fusing or cross tolerance? Actually, yes, that's very close, in understanding. If a person stopped drinking and that then took away the sexual exploration aspect, that is showing it probably was an interaction disorder between alcohol and sex. That's basically, and by stopping one, you help stop the other. That does happen. Okay. That's a good, very good observation. Okay. Someone is saying that they relate to these in different times in different ways. Can you use these but not quite get to addiction? Absolutely. Please do not pathologize everything in your life just because you listen to a talk. Okay. So the issue here is you know, here's a good example. If you use alcohol, okay, alcohol is an example. So there are people who are not alcoholics, but once in a while they'll say, "Man, I could use a drink." And what they just mean is, I can a nice cold beverage that maybe gives me a little bit of a buzz while I sit next to the fire or whatever, and um, and calm down from a busy, hectic day. That's not an addiction. Okay, the addiction is when I have to have the drink because I got home. Because I get home, I have a drink. I have to. There's no will or choice in it anymore. It's been basically a pattern that I must follow. That's the difference. So you can use these things but not get an addiction. However, if you overly rely on it and it becomes a dependency, it's likely to become an addiction. Okay. How do you know if your partner gets involved in such behaviors? Yeah, it's really tough. What you can notice as a partner is a combination of some sort, an interaction disorder of some sort, but you may not be able to pin down which interaction disorder it is. Okay. It's because you don't know the motivation. You don't know what's going on neurochemically. All you can see is, oh, he's come home with alcohol in his breath. Um, Retroactively, you can then, or retrospectively, you can say, well, I know that's when he went out to the strip clubs. And you can start to say, well, there's a combination, but does he drink to disinhibit? Is the drinking part of a fusion of going for a lap dance? Is it some other reason? Okay, or does he is he secretly doing cocaine, buying it from the strippers? You know, like there's all kinds of things there that you just don't know. But you can whatever substance and process and sort of feelings and attachments, those four categories that you can identify and say they seem to go together somewhat, you can at least say there's probably something there, but you won't necessarily pin it down to exactly which motivation it is. Okay. Um, okay. So let me just make sure I didn't miss a question. Okay, so I was able to tolerate my spouse's adventurous sexual appetite when I was drinking or we used drugs together. I can't anymore because I don't drink any longer. That's not a question, just a statement. Oh, okay. But I think it is a question to bring up is that um, you can look at your um, own behavior to say, when I was taking riskier actions, I needed alcohol. When I stopped doing alcohol, I no longer had a tolerance to do the riskier actions. So I can probably retroactively assign a type of addiction interaction disorder, even though it may not be full addiction. The drinking was tied to disinhibiting to do a certain behavior. So it was disinhibition, a disin, yeah, but it wasn't. It, you might want to say it's an interaction disorder, but it's no longer a problem because you cut one out. That's what I'm trying to say. Let's see. Okay, we're doing really well. It was a shorter, I mean, I did talk for close to half an hour, but if there's any other questions on this topic, or we will turn to second phase, which is any questions you might have about psychotherapy in general or some other issues. Somebody's saying, I have a lot of other issues. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Um, this is why it's good to keep things as you are on direct messaging, right? Not to share with everyone. You can ask about things coming up for you in therapy or about therapists or anything like that as well. All right. I want to thank someone here. I'm not going to say your name, but it was really well put. So, not sure what to ask or how, but I find lately I have no feelings or emotions, like an example, depersonalization, as I'm slowly gaining sobriety from sexual addiction. Listen, I'm just first of all, congratulations. It's a big venture. It's a big journey to move towards more sobriety and eventual recovery. Um, but it is a very common reaction to sort of lose affect, lose feelings for a period of time. It's part of it is chemical. Okay, so what happens is your brain is sort of starving for its stimuli, and it's sort of in a lethargy as it's waiting for you to just get back on the addict wagon and start heading off into la la land. It wants you to because it will get its chemicals, it will get its reward. So while it's sitting there waiting, you just feel nothing. You feel like it's like boredom, and it's like you want to cry, but you can't cry. And, you want to be angry, but you couldn't be bothered, you know? Like there's a lot of things like that that I would just totally validate and normalize for you. The thing to watch for is when it lasts for many months. Okay, that's more when it becomes a problem. Having it for weeks is not a big problem. I mean, it sucks, but it's not a problem. It becomes a problem when it just never seems to come back. It shouldn't take months because your system will reboot. That's the point of getting sober, right? Part of the reason is that you're rebooting your neurological system, and you will feel again. Okay, this is true for us, for everything, for our brains. Sometimes you can go through a great divorce or terrible situation and just become numb. Okay, feel nothing, and that can happen. But then, if it stays that way for many months, then you might need neurochemical help, psychopharmacological, right? To kind of boost you to get back into feeling again. Because that's always a danger. So I just thank you for that share. But it is normal to go through those phases. Just watch for how long. All right, excellent. You guys are doing good questions. Um, we have another one coming. A normal period of the feeling has to be under 6 months. Some people say it's only 2 months, but I guess it depends on the shock and trauma of what you've just gone through. I would say if you see, this is where if you're talking to a psychiatrist or a doctor, they're going to look at it much more clearly from how much time you're in it. But I would say anything could be last 2 weeks. Anything could last 2 weeks, and never should we be reacting because for 2 weeks we've been down in the dumps. 2 months can be normal for a lot of people depending on how much they've gone through. When you're approaching 6 months, you're probably in a severe depression, or as an example, right? So I would say if you've been feeling that way for a long period of time, that's when people would usually utilize pharmacological solutions or medications. So examples like people going on to SSRIs or similar medication to get bounce out of a depression. You could lose a job or lose a relationship, depending on how long that relationship is, and be sad for 2 weeks and then start to bounce out of it. If you've been married for a long time, it's going to be more than a few weeks. In fact, we usually say it's 1 month for every year. You know, if you've been together 10 years, you probably need at least 10 months of basically mourning the loss of what you went through. But, so that's why I'm saying that I wish I could give you a very clear answer, and DSM does give you technical timelines, but I think it's more of a matter of determining what you just went through and not comparing it to what someone else is going through. And then maybe you can estimate saying, I'm done being this way. It's been X amount of months. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I will utilize pharmacological assistance and so on, right? So sorry, I'm answering like a politician, but I'm trying not to. Um, okay, I can feel anger, get frustrated at so much lately, but can't cry or show any other big emotions. More uh, Either feel blah or anger. Wish I could feel more sadness or other feelings. Okay, so I just want to comment on that. When people are stuck where anger is, say, as an example, the emotion that keeps coming out, but sadness can't come out, that's because there's something in the anger that needs to be addressed. An injustice, for instance. And I'm going to do a talk on this. It's going to come up, right? But anger is an emotion that evokes us to correct an injustice. You get something done wrong to you, you should be angry. Okay. The problem with anger, though, is sometimes we have a subjective feeling that it's wrong, and really we might be in what you might be entitled, and it was nothing wrong with being denied something, but we've entitled ourselves to the degree that we feel it should have been ours and it wasn't given to us. That can be a subjectively wrong anger. Okay. The other thing is a right anger, and the right anger is anybody in that position would feel it was wrong because the act in itself was unjust. Okay. So when you're stuck in anger and you can't feel anything else, anger is blocking the other emotions. Okay. In that case, anger needs to be addressed in some way. For instance, the perceived injustice needs to be addressed, even if it can't be corrected. And that might mean a letter, that might mean some kind of ritual of letting go, forgiveness, or something like that. That's why you're locked in feeling anger only. Another option, another possibility is when people are coming out of addiction, is that you've always been angry. And what you didn't realize is there is a relationship, addiction interaction disorder, between, say, sexually acting out and anger. And you stop the sexual acting out, and now all you can feel is the anger. Well, guess what? Now you know sexual acting out was about anger, okay? And medicating anger. And now you've stopped that behavior, all you can feel is the anger for now. So that's a clue that your first addiction was anger, and that sexual addiction became a sort of a dependent addiction on being angry. So the best solution to be sexually sober in that case is to work on the anger and be healed in the anger, and then you'll have less probability of even going back into the sexual acting out behaviors. Okay, good questions, guys. Good sharing. Thank you. It helps to be anonymous, eh? You can share all kinds of things. Okay, next one here. My mouse is not playing nice with me. Okay, just some thanks for answering. Okay. Okay, guys, I'm going to give you one last chance if you want to give me another 3 dots because you're thinking up a question. Otherwise, I'll do a wrap up. Okay, if someone can, who just wrote me a comment, can clarify about their concern. Okay, so this is going to come into a bit of the anger talk maybe too, but I'll address it now. Maybe I won't have to. Maybe that'll help me slim down these talks. But so keeping score or a list of resentments, a list of wrongs done, is a form of rage. What it means is at the core, maybe you've been alcoholic or sexaholic or whatever, but in the end, you're really a rageaholic or an angerholic. You're keeping scores about injustices. When I do the talk on how addiction cycles work and how they connect to core beliefs, which is coming up, it's going to be a good talk. You're going to see the connection more clearly. But basically, this is what happens. Your If you were a crack user and you had all the means to utilize crack, the paraphernalia, you keep them nearby so that if you ever scored some rock, some crack cocaine, that you would be able to use it. Okay. When you're an anger addict, you keep scores instead of paraphernalia. because they're little doses of the drug that are access to the drug that allows you to access the drug. Okay. And so there is no recovery while in resentment. The more we keep score about how we've been hurt, the more guaranteed you are to stay an active addict. Okay, so that whole talk I gave on forgiveness really comes back into play because you need to have forgiveness to be able to get sober and get into recovery. You need to let go the resentments and let go of the wrongs, let go of the hurts. And even recent hurts, even things that come up, you can say, hey, I want to hold on to that, but I won't. I'm going to free that person from the justice in my mindset. And that's, I think the best thing that you can do is just forgive. And sometimes, like I said, it means forgiving yourself too. All right. Okay. You think there's a maximum number of masks in masking? Usually it's just one mask, but I guess it depends how deep you want the masks to go. That's a good question. Masking, maybe there's different masks for different addictions. Maybe it's the same one. Listen, there's one thing about this talk is you realize is they all kind of feed back into each other, right? Like it's really hard to tell. Like inclusive is the last one, and it's sort of like if you end up finding out that you have a drug or one addiction that's behind all the others, it's the background of your addiction. You can probably have mislabeled it multiple times as masking and all these other things. But masking itself is really usually just one that you tend to go to. Okay. But just as I say that, I realize humans are diverse and in many unique exceptions always apply. So I say that with a grain of salt. Usually it's one mask, but I'm probably wrong. Okay. Well, listen, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. We're going to try to keep coming back to these issues. I just want to give a fair warning that there's some personal things going on in my life, a health issue of a family member. And if that turns south in the near future, that you might get a sudden cancellation of a director's cut or if you have appointments with me, of your appointment might get moved to the following week or that kind of thing. But so please tune in for next time. Join in for the next director's cut, but be aware by email if we had to cancel. Okay, just because that health issue is unpredictable, and if something suddenly changes, I have to be available to the family, so I won't be available for the director's cut. Okay. Okay, thank you for your well wishes and everything, and I thank you for your coming out to these talks. And again, I always look forward to your feedback. So if you want to send me emails, just to say, here's something that I thought we could do, or just words of encouragement or correction or anything like that, please feel free to send me an email. I'm just going to remind you, it's mbrowning.whitestone@gmail.com. That's the more direct one. Okay. So send me your email. I can't promise to answer them. I get 1,000 emails a week. But I will, if I see it and I can't answer that, I will. But mostly I read them. So you'll at least know it gets read. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. I'm going to end it there. Thanks again. And I'll see you hopefully next week. Bye.